Hi, I'm Maria, and today we are making a gluten-free thin crust pizza. Now, this recipe comes from Linsey Herman of Cake and Commerce. It's not my original recipe. I am really into whole grain cooking, but one of the whole grains I usually use is whole wheat, but that has gluten in it, and a lot of people can't digest gluten. So this is a way to use other types of whole grains to make a pizza crust, so no one has to miss out on their pizza. All right, first thing we're going to use is instant yeast. Now, instant yeast doesn't have a coating on it. Active dry yeast, which is the kind of the Fleischmann stuff you see at the store, that has a coating that has to be dissolved. So if you want to use that, you need to dissolve it with a tablespoon of water. This stuff is just the yeast, so it can go straight in. Next, we have quinoa flour. Quinoa flour is one of the ancient grains. It comes from South America, and it's full of protein, really good for you. It has kind of a grassy sort of flavor, and so what you want to do before you use it is toast it in the oven. Just put it out on a sheet tray, turn your oven on to 300 degrees. As soon as it reaches that temperature, turn it off, put the sheet tray in, and then leave it till it cools, and then you'll be good to go. So that's quinoa flour. I love quinoa. This is white rice flour. The white rice flour is kind of a starchy, granular, kind of gritty sort of thing. But in this application, it keeps things from getting too gummy with your crust. Put that guy in. This one is buckwheat flour, a light one. The darker buckwheat is kind of a purpley color, and so that makes your dough look a little weird. So we'll use the light buckwheat. Then we've got salt, always good in a pizza crust. And then this is xanthan gum. Xanthan is a bacteria. You want to make sure that you get a gluten-free xanthan gum. Some xanthans grow on whey, and some grow on like fermented wheat and that sort of thing. So you want to make sure you get the one that was not grown on wheat. And xanthan gum is a stabilizer and a thickener. They use it a lot in salad dressings and shampoos, actually. But it makes things hold together better. And that's important when you're not using gluten. So I'm going to just give that a quick stir in my mixer. And you do want to use a mixer for this. You do want to use a mixer for this because the dough is not going to be a very stiff dough at all. All right, now to this we're going to add our liquids. And this here is a tapioca gel. I'm just going to pour this right in. So the tapioca gel comes from cooking 2 tablespoons of tapioca starch, which is also known as yucca starch or cassava flour, with 2 cups of water. You just want to bring it just before a boil and it'll turn clear. And what we're doing with that gel, you can see it's kind of goopy and gelatinous. And what it'll do is it'll take the place of the gluten, because when you have flour, wheat flour, that gluten kind of holds layers together. And as the yeast makes its air bubbles, the gluten traps them in. And so this tapioca flour is going, or the tapioca gel is going to do the difference. It's going to hold that air in and make your dough rise. Otherwise, there's not a lot to keep it going. This is honey, and this is my nifty little honey popper thing. Now, you don't have to use the honey. You could use another sweetener if you don't want to do honey, and you don't have to use a sweetener at all. What that does is it helps promote browning in your crust. It gives it a nice golden color. And if you're using a cold gel, if you don't have it fairly warm, it'll help your yeast start eating and growing and producing the carbon dioxide better, sooner. All right, so I'll just mix this up and until it turns into a cohesive goo. All right, so you can see that that's kind of like a biscuit dough consistency. I'm going to add a little olive oil. Let that go for a minute, seconds. And you can see it actually forms, like it pulls kind of strings along, just like a gluten flour would as it's forming the gluten. But then when you pull it apart, it just breaks apart completely. So that's the fascinating thing going on here. So what we're going to do, and I know this does not look like pizza dough, and the first time I made this recipe I thought, I don't know how I feel about that, but it's going to work. Trust me. Linsey made a good recipe. All right, so now what we're going to do, this bowl has been greased with just a little cooking spray to make sure it comes out easily later on. And we're going to let this sit in kind of a warm place. You don't want it hot. Yeast dies if it's above 100 and I think it's 112 degrees. So make sure it's not in a hot place. You don't want to put it in your oven or anything, but just not next to a cold window. All right, so we just want to cover this and then let it rise for about an hour. It'll get nice and poofy and fill up this bowl. You could also put it in the refrigerator at this point and leave it for 8 hours or so. So you could do this in the morning and then bake it off at night. If you wanted to let it rise overnight or up to 24, 48 hours, you could add just a half teaspoon of yeast and then put it in the fridge at this point, and it'll take longer for it to rise. Okay, so it's been about an hour, and you can see this guy is escaping from the bowl. There's the kind of a dome on the plastic wrap, and that is all the carbon dioxide that the yeast is releasing as it eats its way through the grains. And so now we're going to shape our loaf. This actually makes 2 rounds. I'm just going to do one right now and put the other in the fridge, but you could obviously bake them both off or just use half. Now this is clearly not like a normal dough. So I have sprayed my baking mat with nonstick spray just in case. And what really helps, getting extra water on this is not going to hurt anything, so I'm just going to dip my, my spatula in this bowl of water and use that to kind of smear it out. Just keep dipping. You want to get this nice and thin. You will notice a little bit more of the flavor of the quinoa if it's thicker. So we want to get it a nice thin crust pizza. If you see any point where you can see through to the bottom, just kind of go back over and fill it back in. Since you're not going to tear your dough, because it doesn't tear. It just moves. Oops. All right, so this is ready to go. I'm going to let it rest for about 10 minutes, and while that's resting, I have another sheet pan in the oven that I'm going to slide this onto when it's ready to go in. All right, now that's ready to go into a 500-degree oven for about 10 minutes, and then we'll pull it out, top it, and stick it back in. We've pulled it back out of the oven, and I used my cold pan again to do that, and I'm just going to slide it off. It should actually slide off pretty easily off the silpat. If you're using parchment paper, it might stick a little on the bottom, so what you'll want to do is flip the whole thing over and peel it off the back. But with this guy, he's just fine, so we'll just toss that to the side. It's not very brown on the bottom, so that's why we're taking the silpat off, and we'll slide it back onto that hot sheet directly, and that'll give you more of a crispy crust. And now we're ready to top. Now I'm just using a tomato sauce I made with some garlic that I sauteed in olive oil and canned tomato sauce. You could use whatever sauce recipe you like, or you could use a pre-made sauce. Some people use spaghetti sauce. Whatever makes you happy. You don't want to get it too thick because you don't want it to be a soggy pizza. All right, and then we've got some cheese. This is just a simple cheese pizza. This is fresh mozzarella that I've just diced. I like to do chunks of fresh mozz. I don't like to grate it because it makes nice little pools. This is a little asiago cheese. It's a nice kind of earthy tasting cheese. Gives it a good cheesy flavor. Okay, so I'm just going to slide this back onto the hot pan in the oven. It'll only take 3 to 5 minutes. All you want to do is melt the cheese and get it kind of brown and bubbly. All right, so there it is. Looks and will taste just like pizza. Gluten-free crispy pizza crust. I'm just going to top it with a little fresh basil. And we are ready to eat.